Today we are coming to learn about standard deviation. A lot of people are confused as to how to interpret standard deviation of a data set. We cannot really interpret standard deviation from a data set unless we have a comparable data set. And so standard deviation typically is how spread out your data is with respect to the average score or the mean. And it is given as the square root of the summation of the square of the deviation of each variable from the mean divided by the number of observations. It can either be the population or a sample. In this case, we are using the population. Now, to interpret standard deviation, we would use data set that we already have in our stata file. So we have the scores of WASI examination for ADISCO and PRESEC. I will just browse so that you can see how the scores are displayed. So we have the scores for ADISCO, WASI examination scores for ADISCO, and WASI examination scores for PRESEC. So we would go to analyze and obtain summary statistics for these two schools, and then we can examine the summary statistics and how to interpret those summary statistics. So I use my stata to obtain the summary statistics by typing sum, and then I select the two variables that I have in my data, which is ADISCO and PRESEC. So when you obtain your summary statistics, which is displayed in stata, I already have put that on the slide. You would realize that the average score for each of the schools is the same. ADISCO has 70% and PRESEC also has 70%. Most often, a lot of people would tell you that a smaller standard deviation means that your data sets are not spread out, are not too far away from the mean, and therefore a smaller standard deviation is desirable. But in actual sense, how do you determine what a small standard deviation is? How do you determine how small a standard deviation is or how big a standard deviation is? You can only do that when you have two comparable data sets, two or more comparable data sets. So in this case, you cannot interpret standard deviation whilst you are using only one data set, because it will be difficult to determine whether the standard deviation that you have is small or larger. So we are going to use ADISCO scores and PRESEC, and we will be able to do a comparison of the standard deviations from these two data sets. So whereas we have the same mean for both ADISCO and PRESEC, which is 70-70, we do have different standard deviation for the two schools. So for ADISCO, we have a standard deviation of 15.8, whereas PRESEC has a standard deviation of 1.5. What this means is that although the average examination score is 70, what it means is that for ADISCO, the data set are spread out and far away from the average score, which is the mean. What it means is that you probably would have some isolated brilliant students and some students who also have performed quite poorly. But for PRESEC, the standard deviation of 1.5 means that the data set is not too far away, or all the data points that you have are not too far away from the mean. And so almost all the students have performed around the mean, which is 70. So it is always important to have comparable data set when you are interpreting standard deviation. And this is very important. You cannot really determine whether a standard deviation is small or big unless you have a comparable data set. And I hope this has helped to address the concerns that I have received. Thank you.